Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Dr. Nia Ruth. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. And always sponsored by the original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Sweet and Bordeaux series of wines. Hey, have a listen to Carla Tiago. She is the winemaker at the oldest port house in Portugal, at Copque Ports. I used to say Copque. It's actually Copque. Really fascinating conversation about the region and the wine and the history of that wine. Have a listen. But not while we're here. We're here to hear from Dr. Nia Ruth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
And thanks for driving from Palm Springs.
I know. It was quite the journey, just driving through the mountains and seeing all the palm trees along the way. It was a really, really rough ride.
Really brutal, right?
Brutal.
How is Palm Springs these days? It's gotten pretty busy, hasn't it?
It has. So it's beautiful as ever. So we actually recently moved there in early June. So we got there right at the heat of summer. So that actually was brutal. And I think the good thing is that we got there at the worst, if you will, time. That's behind us. But the good thing about that time is that it was empty. The town, didn't have to make any reservations. We could just walk right up, walk right in. Over the weekend, we went to dinner at one of our favorite places, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be a 2-hour wait." And we're like, "Wait, what?
Really?"
Like we had just walked in there like a month ago without.
I mean, it's the community is still that transient.
Oh yes, very very tourist heavy. San Diego, LA, I think primarily.
Wow.
So yeah, it's very very busy. I think it'll be busy for the next 6 or so months.
For the listeners, it's a couple hours south of here, of Los Angeles, and it's the upper desert of California. And it was also the romping grounds of some of the rich and famous over the days, particularly the Marx Brothers lived there, and Frank Sinatra lived there, and
oh yes, we have Frank Sinatra Way, and there's like little drives, historical architectural drives you can do to look at all of the homes that belong to your famous LA favorite actors and actresses.
And we went through the big pink place on the corner of. Why my brain not working today? It's very famous. It's got a golf course, its own golf course. It's the house. It's the Obamas stayed there when they were here. What is the name of that place? Oh well, that's good. That's good podcasting, isn't it? So it's good to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So the first has got to be it's Dr. Nia Ruth. You have a PhD in psychology.
Yes.
From NYU.
Yes.
Interesting path to take. To get to I think we laughed earlier about like if you're going to go from psychology to wine, you should probably see a psychologist. So
you made me laugh again because it is potentially true. We'll see how it goes.
How long have you been doing this?
So I have been within the wine space, I would say since about the end of 2017. So I started with blogging, and I became the wine columnist for San Diego Magazine, and I started traveling to more wine regions and just really meeting people locally here in Southern California that were involved in wine. After honestly, probably a month into blogging, I was like, you know what? I need to really solidify everything that I'm learning about wine. I want to take a course. So I was honestly oh, the WSET, so Wine and Spirits Education Trust. I was like, that's probably like a little too serious. I'll do that as my retirement kind of career. I don't really need to learn that much. I'm just going to do an entry level course at San Diego State. So I did that, and probably 3 weeks in, I had signed up for WSET level 2, and then right after that took WSET level 3 because I was just so enthralled and so just in love with wine and just learning about it. So
do you have some kind of and I had this conversation this morning. It's not a sarcastic comment. Because it started out sounded like it was going to be sarcastic, but I didn't mean it to be that way.
Oh boy!
It's this academic or education drive for knowledge. It sounds like you do that because you became a PhD in psychology, and then all of a sudden now wine tickled your fancy, and here you are trying to study and learn more about wine. Is that just part of your nature?
I think that's so funny that you point that out because I do think that I don't do anything halfway. Once I've decided this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'm excited about, this is what I want to do, I take it to the highest level that I can. And I really, I think that I certainly am always on the pursuit of learning and education and all of those things. But I'm also, honestly, not to sound incredibly cheesy, but I'm on the pursuit of happiness. So, and like life's too short to not be.
Cheesy, yeah, okay.
It was pretty cheesy. But, I feel like the reason I wanted to actually learn about wine and not just be a general wine consumer is because I knew that I would enjoy wine in a different way, in a more, I knew that I could find a deeper connection, and I would enjoy my trips to wineries. I would enjoy my, time at restaurants ordering from wine menus. I just knew I would enjoy it more if I understood it more.
I think that's a very important point that we'll peel back a little bit. We get deeper into the wine side. But how would you just start blogging about wine? Let's just say one of my listeners wants to blog about wine. They want to blog about anything. What'd you write about in the beginning? Did you know anything?
That's a great question. So I will tell you the exact story of how it happened. So it was the day after Thanksgiving in 2017. I was at my parents' house. My brother and his fiance were there. My sister and her husband and her children were there. And I was the single oldest sister just hanging out, and everyone's like all busy with all their hobbies. And I was like, I have hobbies, but I was like, let me actually create like a real hobby. I'm like, what? I love wine. I think I should do this. I think I should make this my hobby. So this is kind of how it started. So I told my sister and my sister-in-law, the three of us are talking about it. My sister-in-law says, she's like, Nia, why don't you document this? Like, if you love it, like document your journey, document, the steps that you're taking, document all of the wines that you drink and you love just for fun. And I was like, you know what? That does sound fun. I'm certainly not a whiz with the camera, but I had just written a 350-page dissertation. So I'm a whiz behind the keyboard.
Of course.
So I thought, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? Let me give it a try. So literally that day, my sister-in-law she puts up, she fires up Squarespace. She makes me a website, blog. She made me an Instagram account, specifically for this. We talked about, how am I going to do it? What's my process going to be? How many blog posts am I going to write a month? And I really just took it from there. But truth be told, I did not know how to do any of those things. This was all my sister-in-law. So shout out to Savannah. She to this day helps me pretty much every day with every single, not maybe every day, but definitely with every single thing that I have done since. So it's been really cool.
It's a great story. There's a lot of things that can come from this. And one of them that I had on the show, Tila Armazio, she's a very famed New York Times bestselling author, and a couple of books, one called The Hotel Place Vendôme about the Ritz during the war, which is a fascinating story with gossip of Coco Chanel and Ernest Hemingway. But she also wrote the book Widow Clicquot, which is a very famous book, a tome on the ascent of champagne in the world, focusing on Widow Clicquot. And it started almost exactly what you just said.
Really?
They were sitting around with their friends, and they used to bring a bottle, and they'd start gossiping, and then somehow Tilar decided to look up a couple of facts. So when they got together, had a glass of champagne, she'd spout off something about Widow Clicquot, and all of a sudden it's like, this should be a book.
I love
and
that.
So if you're used to writing 350-page dissertations, then that could be the next step.
Oh gosh, I really did think I was one and done on the dissertation, very long form writing front. Blogging, few thousand words is definitely more my pace these days. But it's been a few years. The PTSD from going through grad school is starting to wear off. So yeah, no, maybe, and I think that's really cool. That makes me feel like I might be onto something.
I don't think people realize that listeners, particularly in this case, would understand the amount of work it takes to write.
Yes.
And the thought process and writer's block, and how some days it just doesn't fit what you're doing. Like sometimes my podcast, I just can't connect the dots sometimes.
Yep.
But certainly when you're writing, my father passed away in June, and he founded this whole industry in the direct-to-consumer world in 1972, and I've been documenting his story. And I can sit down sometimes and just go, man, it ain't working.
Oh, yeah. It's
pretty hard.
It's very hard. So my writing process in general is I just start and I write down whatever crazy things. I might be in the middle of a sentence and I have another idea, and I just jot that down at the bottom of the page. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day. And it is a mess. And then the next day, I'm like, all right, I'm blocking off this hour. I'm going to work on it and work on it. So that's kind of my, because I totally envy people that can sit down, write the great American novel, write a great blog post, whatever it might be, in just one sitting, and it's just done. But also, I mean, I think you probably are all gathering that I'm a perfectionist. So one and done just isn't really my style. But, sometimes even for the shorter form content, which sounds crazy, but just writing an Instagram caption sometimes, I'm just stumped. I'm looking at the photo, I'm looking at the reel, whatever it might be, and I'm like, I just don't know what to say.
Nothing.
I
got
just think
nothing.
I have to get back to this tomorrow. Yeah, I just have nothing, and I don't know.
It's just natural.
Yep.
We have the same problem with posts, etc. And you ever feel like you go back and read and go, oh my God, that was horrible.
all of the time.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the best moments are when I really surprise myself. I'm like, wow, I was so tired. I was kind of loopy feeling when I wrote that, but I'm like, that's actually really good. I can definitely work with this.
Right.
I can make this actually awesome. I wouldn't have thought of that point today. So I do sometimes surprise myself. But you know what, though? The other thing is when I'm disappointed, I know I have my expectations low going back into that first or second draft of something so that I'm not too disappointed in myself.
The other day, I was asked, excuse me, by an intern we had here. She was great. She did all my talking points for the podcast that she worked here, and so she asked for a letter of rec for college, and she wants to be a woman winemaker. And I've introduced her to winemakers up in Napa that she's visited. So really excited for her career.
That's fantastic.
That she's starting this career. She has something. Look, who knew? Like when you're going into college, what you wanted to do, nobody, right? So,
right. Clearly, I didn't.
Here's somebody understands that. So, I wrote the recommendation. I thought it was pretty good, but like an idiot, I left it up on the iPad at home, and my daughter, the baker, was in town, and my other daughter was there, and they all corrected it.
They're going through with the red pen.
This is my article. It's my letter of rec. Not you. You're not writing it. It's not coming from you.
Oh my gosh, I do that with my dad too. If it makes you feel any better.
They fix it up. So you're blogging. You're talking about wine. You probably realize that, gee, I probably need to learn more to have this conversation with people. And so, did you study to see if the WITSET was the right place to go, or if you should have been a master's, Court of Sommeliers or a Master of Wine program? What drove you toward WITSET versus the other ones?
I think that's such a great question. So, my understanding of the main difference between WSET and CMS is that CMS is more kind of service driven. So it's like, it will teach you the things that you need to know to work in a restaurant as a sommelier. Whereas my understanding of the WSET is that it's more of kind of the academic route, and it's just kind of more, gosh, I certainly don't want to say general, but it's like just kind of that broader overview, and it's a little less focused on the restaurant side.
Hospitality side, yeah.
There you go. Sorry, hospitality side.
Yeah, important part though. You're right. The Court of Sommeliers is more hospitality driven. But you can read all kinds of books. I mean, I didn't show you. I don't know if you saw the library walking in here. We've got volumes of wine books. What made you think that you needed to go into an accredited program of some sort?
I honestly think that it was just because of, my background in history of just kind of wanting to do these things that, like, at the end, I'm like, all right, I've learned all of the things that, this program says that I need to learn to be good at this. Does it mean that when I was done with WSET, I just never read a book again? I never picked anything up? Of course not. I know that, it's so limited in the things that you're actually learning. It's super, super helpful and provides a fantastic foundation, but there's always so much more to learn. Like, I actually, if I haven't kind of read a wine book or really kind of dug deep within like a month or two, I'm like, I feel like I'm forgetting things. I need to go back. I need to find something new to read. I need to, just continue to polish and sharpen.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some advice. It's free today.
Oh, wonderful.
I've had the privilege, because my dad was academic, and he had a master's in pharmacology and was a prolific reader. Both my parents were prolific readers. And this collection of books I have is fascinating to read, because the benchmark for the press was from maybe even the 40s and 50s, some of these books in the 60s, and reading books that on the subject matter from that era is very enlightening, because some of it's exactly the same what you're going to read today, but some of it's a different perspective. It has a different viewpoint. Not that viewpoint's wrong or right, but it has an incredible rounding out of your knowledge base by reading old books on the subject of wine, because like today I had a conversation, like I told you, with the influencer out of Canada and the Asian Pacific Wine and Spirits Institute, and we were talking about the Harry Waas of the world, which was one of the great English critics of wine, Michael Broadbent, another one, that would have looked at and described wines completely differently than we do today.
Yeah.
And my father too would cringe at some of the terms that are used today. We just didn't do that back then. And it's kind of interesting. It kind of
Totally
gives you a new perspective on it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that, in the wine space, we can kind of get stuck in, we all have our different unique perspectives, but I think it's kind of easy to get a little bit stuck in that bubble. And, even when it comes to drinking wine from the regions that you're familiar with and drinking wines only from producers that you're only grapes they're familiar with, all of those things, I think and then taking that the step broader is, thinking about the actual viewpoint on wine. So I love that. That is going to be my next. That was great advice to read an older book on wine.
So
that will be my next read. You'll have to let me know any specific titles you have.
In fact, I was talking to a Burgundian importer in San Francisco called Atherton Imports, incredible wines. And he goes, "What are you reading?" I told him the name of the book. He goes, like, "Never heard of it." I go, "Yeah, because it was written like in 1962. I'm sure you've never heard of it."
It would be weird if you had.
So you're at WSET 2 and 3.
Yes.
You haven't. What is 4 is the top, right?
Yeah. So 4 would be. It's called WSET Diploma, and so
Yeah.
there's I believe 6 units, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
than 2, 3.
Well, it's an interesting. I'm not going to say irony, but it's an interesting part of our business because, like I said, you could read and read and read. And this is a very structured thing. It's a very respected way to learn about wine, and whether you're going to be in the industry or not, it's a very respected credential to have. But like I said, you could read all you wanted. It really comes down to how much passion do you have for the subject, how far are you willing to go to experience that passion, and then you really got to taste. And the reason I brought that up is that the young woman that's with us during the internship, her mother took the online courses from Cornell during the pandemic, and can talk about Piemonte and Tuscany, and can talk about Burgundy and Bordeaux, but until you sit down at some point and go, aha, this is what they're talking about. Does the WSET include that? To taste and some
It definitely does. So for WSET Level 2, it was pre-pandemic, and I got to taste. And our instructor, she would bring in, not like just the wines that you're supposed to have. She'd bring in her higher end stuff. She ran a wine shop. It was amazing. I learned so much because it's like a multi-sensory process, you're listening, you're reading, and you're tasting, which just really, really brings it all together. I was not as fortunate because WSET 3 was during COVID. So I got these little tasting kits sent to my house. But truth be told, the quality of those wines are not going to be, what this instructor who runs a wine shop was bringing in for our class. So I definitely, got to understand the basics during that education piece, the formal education piece, I should say. I think beyond that, I completely agree with your point. Spending time in a region, because what I have learned is that each region has an incredibly unique personality, and the people are unique. Their philosophies are unique. Their winemaking techniques are unique. Of course, the grape varieties that they focus on are unique. And actually going and speaking to the people that are really the heart and soul of each region has been by far the way that I've learned the most. So yes, the structure and the formal education is certainly where I thrive, but I have learned so much more outside of that. And I think it's been such a cool experience because, growing up, you're kind of taught formal education is what you need to excel at. And that's just what you should be good at. And that's where you're going to learn every single thing that you need to know. I know that all of us as adults, totally disagree with that, but I have found that way more so in wine than I did in my prior career, even as a psychologist and researcher.
Well, we're very fortunate because every year there's new vintage and there's new stuff to learn.
Exactly.
One of the conversations I had this morning was so fascinating because it's hard for me to articulate these things sometimes, and he was very good at it. And that is this value of a glass of wine and the story behind that glass of wine.
Yes.
And I profess here that the story cannot be that I got it for $3 on Groupon.
Does Groupon still exist?
Oh yeah, you're right. And the wines, I was looking at the wines of the day. It's oh my God.
Oh no.
I know where they buy them from, and I know who sells it to them, so I know exactly what's in the bottle.
You know too much. You know too much.
But that's not a story, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're sitting around there thinking, hey, I got this from Groupon. Instead of what you're learning, and then we're going to talk about what you're telling your blog followers, this history of this winery and this winemaker or this grape or this piece of ground, there's some story to tell from a real glass of wine.
Absolutely.
And what is it that you would like to get through to your followers on what the glass of wine is?
Yeah. So, what I always say is that I think every glass of wine tastes better when I know the story behind it. So, what I have focused on over the last, year and a half, 2 years, like what I've really, really learned is that small production wine is just so fascinating to me. I think it's so cool that, small producers, they have more time to tend to each and every vine that they are growing. They have more time in the cellar. They tend to, use.
Ooh, there's the baker. Sorry.
They tend to use low intervention practices and not include any additions to their wine. And it's just so it's just really, really cool and also I should say they're more accessible. It's more accessible to meet them and interact with them because they aren't, super busy being drawn in a million directions because they have all these kind of more corporate responsibilities. And I think the thing though, beyond all of those other things that makes me love small production wine is the heart and soul behind it. What I've learned is that people are not planting a vineyard and making wine they're not doing it for the profit. They're not doing it for the clout. They're not doing it, they are doing it because it is what they love and they think of it as an art and a craft and it's just, what they want to create and bring to the world. So what I have kind of made my mission in the wine world is sharing those stories back. So, hearing those stories, relaying them, also, creating ways to connect small producers to, wine lovers that are maybe, and I mean, I was going to say that might not have access to their vineyard space or their tasting room, but at the end of the day, a lot of these small wineries don't even have, a tasting room. So kind of thinking of creative ways to connect people and help to amplify and tell the stories of small producers.
It's used an interesting term, that the corporate responsibilities. And when we go to the market, we see the brands that we see, Apothic Red and Josh and all that stuff. You kind of go, 19 Crimes. That's exactly what you're talking about, these formula-driven wines that the profit margin is required in order to work. Now, that's not to say, mom and pop winemaking enterprises need profit too. I like to ask the question, like, what would you think the business would be like if profit wasn't part of this business? In other words, how different would the wines that we taste and drink be if everything was subsidized by some organization and your only job was to produce the best you could produce?
That's such a great question. Have you asked winemakers? I'm so curious to hear what they say.
I don't know if I've ever asked a winemaker because all I've had lately in here is port houses and champagne houses, and you can't ask Clovis Tétanger, what would happen if you couldn't make a profit? Because he goes, what are you talking about? Actually, he told me that he was a small enterprise. I'm like, what are you crazy?
Yes,
but it's interesting. It's an interesting question because so much of the market, when you go to the market, let's ask this question. When you go to the market, how do you decide? If you haven't tasted the wines, what do you tell your clients to do?
Yeah, so I have like a little kind of guide that kind of guides you through the ways to like kind of there's clues, so first of all, we all know that decoding a wine label can be very tricky and complicated. So I've kind of led people through kind of different clues to kind of assess and understand a wine label. So, I think first of all, a lot of people that aren't even really into wine don't even really know what a vintage is. So we don't really talk about vintage because it could get like that's kind of higher level. So if we're talking about just the really entry level things, my general advice is the more specific, the better. So if you see a wine that says produced in California versus if you find a wine that says produced in the Russian River Valley, I'm like, okay, that's, they're being really specific about where their grapes are produced. And kind of like, this is a huge generalization, but I think, when you see a wine that says like lot 7 of blank and blank vineyard in blank and blank region, like, I think it shows pride. I think it shows that winery and those, the winemaker, all of the people involved are really proud of that wine and they want you to know exactly where it's from. It shows that they are making really specific distinctions. Like they are taking the time to say, all right, our grapes in lot 7 are, more acidic. So we're going to make the wine that's like this versus our grapes from lot 11, whatever that might be. So yeah, I think that that's a really, important factor. Another thing that I try to lead them to is, this is again another generalization, but of course this is general advice that I give. So thinking about the fact that, you and I know that, let's say the Sonoma Coast makes fantastic Pinot Noir. So that, so it's like, I kind of try to lead them to associate regions with grapes. So that's just kind of one example. I give a few examples and I'm like, if you remember these like 4 things and you walk in
no, that's
to
good.
the store, you're probably going to get a better wine than if you don't know these 4 things. So
I think the problem is, for the listeners, the wine, if they've invested in planting a vineyard, which is very expensive, like 20 grand an acre, and you got to wait 4 years probably to get your first crop that you think you can make wine from, and you bottle it and you ferment it and you bottle it and you kind of go, it's not exactly what I was looking to do, or you ferment it still in the tank, you're not going to dump it.
Yep. You're
going to either bottle it as your brand, or you're going to sell the juice to somebody else that's going to bottle it as their brand, or blend it with something that's a little better, but it's going to be bottled. It's not going to be dumped. And so by looking at the label and understand the granularity of the label, you might be able to draw some conclusions as to what this wine might be, which one, like the example you gave about Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir or Russia River Pinot or Petaluma Gap or something. Yeah, you could have a reasonable expectation that wine has some pedigree to it, but you really still don't know.
You definitely don't know.
Until you've tasted it, you don't know.
That's true.
And what's interesting to me with labeling in California, or in the United States, actually, you and I could start Ruth Vineyards tomorrow. And
I would love that.
That could be a...
Let's do it.
Wait till I tell you what I pay for juice. That could be a DBA of a DBA of a DBA, and we could file with the feds that we're going to do it under this different brand called San Diego's Best, but it's really Ruth Vineyards. That is completely untraceable. In other words, you and I guess last year, I just read this, there was 110,000 new brands submitted to the federal government last year.
Wine brands or just all brands?
No.
Wine
brands.
Whoa.
110,000.
Wow.
Which means you and I can start anything we want. And this is happening more now than it ever did.
Yeah.
A lot of the wines you see at Bevmo or Total Wine are their own brands, which I don't have a problem with that, right? Because a licensed winery made them. Yep. They were planted somewhere and picked by somebody and fermented somehow, and you can get some pretty good deals that way. But like you said, you don't know, and particularly with the point I'm making is with a domestic wine, with the layers of bureaucracy you could put behind it, you could never trace it down. It's a lot easier with an import because at least in the back label, there's a legal entity that brings that wine into this country, and that's absolutely necessary and real.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I have people I don't know about you, I'm sure you do. They go on vacation. My members, it's like, you're texting me pictures of the wine? Don't you have something else to do?
Oh, all the time. I have people texting me. This is like more than a handful of times a week, I could say, going to restaurants and texting me a picture of the wine list and asking me what to order. I save the photo. I circle all my choices, like a few sparklings, whites and reds for them.
That's pretty good after you started blogging in 2017 and 5 years later, your people are asking for your advice by texting you a menu. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh no, it's great. I really, really love it. And that's kind of, what led me to transition to working in wine full time was that I was getting so many questions from people that I didn't even know, asking me in DMs, sending me emails, just asking like general questions, people that are traveling. They're like, oh, I'm going to this country. Which winery should I go to? And I'm like, okay, I love this question. Yeah. I have not been to
that's hard.
So country in years
really
that I really don't know, but I do know a person that lives there that you should connect with, and so I try to be a resource in whatever way I can.
Well, there's so many, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yes.
Well, that's fascinating that they're already requesting that from you. I think that's great. Somebody sent me a picture the other day. They were in Italy and they're in front of the Parthenon or something, or in front of the Colosseum, and they're drinking this wine. Like, hey, can you get this? I'm like, dude, come on, man.
I need to know a little bit more about it.
Can you do something like, I think your wife's sitting there, or your husband, and you probably want to talk to them.
Oh my gosh, it's hilarious.
So we were talking about a little bit about this off camera, and that is the inclusion of minorities in the wine business, and it's sort of a hot topic. And I had this conversation with Tahira a little bit. We talked about her, Tahira Abibi, and I want to go back, way back, and there's a woman who was sort of one of the pioneer women in this industry. Her name was Joanne Dupuis. She wasn't in the wine making business. She was, this is about probably early 60s. She was the first woman to ever address the vintners, the Napa Valley Vintners Association.
Oh,
yeah.
That's very cool.
And she's still alive. She's 94. She lives in Napa.
Amazing.
And she'd be great to talk to if you ever get up there.
Oh, yeah.
I can set that up for you. She's a fascinating woman, but she was left, her husband left her, and she's standing there in the early 60s with 3 kids in the Napa Valley with no vocation and just an interest in wine and travel.
Yeah.
And here she is. She ends up speaking in front of Louis Martini, Brother Timothy of the Christian Brothers, Joe Heights, Mr. Louis Mr. Another one of the great guys, the Barrett family, all these things.
Wow.
And then she ended up being one of the premier travel wine touring groups of the world.
Wow.
And I think she has a lot to do with the success of women in the wine business, unknowingly, actually. And we had a great podcast together. But it is more prevalent, particularly women in wine.
Mm-hmm.
Minorities in wine is probably still struggling. Do you see that, or do you see headwinds to that?
Oh gosh, I mean, when I even go to wine country, I can count on one hand the number of people of color that I see even tasting, much less people that are actually, in the industry, whether it's making wine or even on the hospitality side of the wine business. There's not a whole lot of people of color. So I think, we talked about that article that I wrote for San Diego Magazine. Gosh, I think it was about 2 years ago now. And that was a really cool time in the country where, I think all of the, so this was all, I should say, around the time of the George Floyd incident. So, it was very interesting as the whole George Floyd, movement started to happen, because as a woman of color, I notice and see these things literally many times a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nobody notices. They're not getting pressed. I expected this to be the exact same. So, we've also talked a little bit off camera about how COVID has changed so much, et cetera, et cetera. This, to me, in my opinion, I think is another thing that COVID changed, because my friends that, a person of color was killed by the police 2 months ago, not a single friend reached out to me to talk about it or to, ask my opinion on it. Wow. San Diego Magazine certainly didn't reach out to ask me to, write an article about, people of color in the industry. And, because it was COVID, because people were locked down, people were just paying more attention. And so I thought that was a really nice opportunity to, highlight. It was being highlighted all over the place in all industries, and I felt really honored to have the opportunity to write about that in the wine industry.
So do you think those headwinds are loosening? I guess that's the word I'm looking for. The headwinds are loosening? Because I checked into the Napa Valley, the Black Napa Valley Vintners Association, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even 15. There were 5 members.
Yeah.
Now there's like 250.
It's definitely, yes. I was going to say, I know that organization.
Yeah. So is that because the barriers are lightening, or because the level of awareness of the industry and what it has to offer, a lifestyle that is occurring, or is it a combination?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of probably a few things. So one, right when the George Floyd situation happened, there was a huge spike, a huge bubble up of, everybody in the wine industry was speaking out, and they were creating scholarship programs, and there were actual specific organizations created with the goal of mentoring Black men and women in the wine industry to, allow them to advance their career, et cetera. Those organizations do exist. I don't think they're getting as much attention. The winery. So, one of the elements of that article that I wrote was, talking to folks in the wine industry that have made changes, or folks that were already ahead of the game but had never even really been acknowledged for it. I actually did a follow-up story about a year after that, where I wanted to talk to people in the wine industry, people at wineries that had made those changes, and just kind of hear how it went. And to be totally honest, it was kind of difficult for me to find them. I had to search really hard.
Really? Wow.
I was asking a lot of different people that were very connected, and I'm like, okay, tell me, like, just give me any leads that you have, and I will, start to talk to these people and see what I can find. So there definitely was a change. I wish that there was still a spotlight on those changes.
It's I want to go back. I reached out to them. Maybe it's because it was during the pandemic and there was so much activity. I wanted to taste as much as I could taste, because don't forget that like I did this woman on the show not too long ago. She's the 7th generation wine family in California,
Wow.
which is pretty rare that there's 7 generations
really
worth.
cool.
And we mostly talked about organic versus biodynamic farming, but she was saying the same thing, that women in wine, was a pretty small group. Well, it was 0 when her grandfather was here, and then it's certainly from the winemaking standpoint has changed considerably since then. So the strides have been made, but like again, I'm not the young intern here. She wants to be a winemaker. She's going to go to school. So I'm wondering if it's social barriers that you have to traverse, or stick your big toe in the water to see what happens before you get either confronted with reasons not to do it, or you just pursue it.
Yeah.
I had Aaliyah, forget her last name. She makes wines from flowers.
Oh.
Yeah.
What kind of flowers?
All kinds of stuff.
Oh, that's
She's
really
in
cool.
Oakland.
Very interesting.
She wasn't even able to send me samples because they had sold out.
Wow.
But she's a young black girl, and she said, I've encountered racism, sexism, and grape supremacy, which I thought was hilarious. I go, wait, hold on a second. What's
grape
she says, I walk into a wine shop and I show them I have wines from flowers, and they're like, well, we don't sell wines from flowers. We only sell wines from grapes, so that's the way it works. So that was really interesting.
That's funny.
But I want to expand that those conversations into what's happening currently in the industry with minorities, and the Chinese and all other ethnicities that get involved with it. I'm Armenian. There are a lot of Armenians actually in the wine business. Well, actually, Noah landed the ark in Armenia and planted grapes, right? So
you are the wine industry.
We are part of the wine industry. So what's next for you? You have a club.
Yes.
It's I think you mentioned a little bit about it being small producers.
Yes.
Which my biggest competitor in this industry was the California Wine Club, and that's how they started.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They started as mom and pop only. Had to get out of it. They buy wines from a broader spectrum. So how do you go about finding your wines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of it started, with producers that I had a relationship with, just because I had been, kind of working with wine, not necessarily fully in the wine industry, but very much involved for a few years. I had some connections. So I started there, and it was really fun because those were people that were cheering me on. They were so supportive. They took a huge risk on me in those first 3, 4, 5 months. From there, it's really been a lot of referrals and kind of word of mouth. I work with winery, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, we had such a great time working with you. We actually have some friends down the street. I think you'd love their wine. Can we connect you, and you can, see if you want to feature them in the club. I think they'd be a great fit. So that's been really, really cool as well, to, kind of expand my network in that way via just word of mouth. So yeah, no, it's been
What
cool.
would be the, you and I would talk probably for days on this question, but what the unexpected headwinds that you encountered doing this, decided they wanted to get into business and sell some wine. Forget the club side of it necessarily, just the idea of selling wine, and particularly, I'm sure you have a website with an internet presence. What is not shocked you, but sort of went, oh, wow, didn't expect this.
Shipping.
Yeah, shipping.
Did you expect me to say shipping?
And it's going up again, by the way, just so you know.
I did see 6.9%.
Yes,
but
no, that's only the rack rate. Wait till you get to the accessory charges.
No, oh my gosh, I'm so sad.
They're brutal.
Oh yeah, that's going to be pretty brutal going to 2023. So that has been incredibly difficult. Of course, all the licensing that goes on behind the scenes. It is also related to shipping issues, I think.
Are you packing and shipping too? Or
I'm not actually.
The wineries are doing it.
Yeah, I'm working directly with the wineries to handle that side. The idea is that when I grow and it kind of becomes more pragmatic to pack and ship and hold inventory, then I'll transition to that. format. But yeah, so even though I'm not doing the shipping myself, it is still absolutely the biggest burden. And it's also the idea that, you also are direct to consumer. So, 3 knocks on the door and then the wine gets sent back to the winery and then we have to ship it again. And then shipping in the summertime, how can, we're paying so much more for the cold chain shipping, for you're putting ice packs in that don't really stay that cold for very long. And, being in the desert in Palm Springs,
that doesn't help you. Well,
very sad for me getting wines that were just very, very, very warm. Luckily, I don't think anything was terribly tarnished, but yeah, I would say that's definitely the biggest issue or struggle, I guess, headwind, to use your term.
We look at this business every year as to where we're going to make some changes, and one of them was, well, maybe we should pack and ship off campus and use a fulfillment house, which is pretty popular in the internet world these days. However, we visited what was then the largest, I think it was wineshipping.com or Pack and Ship or something. Went and met the guy in this beautiful facility, 100,000 square foot warehouse, all kinds of conveyors. And then he showed us the returns aisle.
Oh, no.
And this is like pallet racking to the ceiling with brown boxes. And I go, what happens to these? He goes, well, we wait until the winery tells us what to do with them. And I thought, oh my gosh, that you're out of the control then.
Exactly.
And the communication level has to be extraordinarily high to make sure the customers, because it's all about the customer, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't take a whole lot for them to say, screw you, I'm not doing this anymore.
Cancel. Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
The rate of attrition is very high, and if you can get a lifetime value out of them, that's great. I had a conversation with Kevin O'Leary, the famed Shark Tank guy.
Oh, okay.
He has his own wine, right?
I did not know that. I've never watched
He sells
Shark
a ton
Tank,
of wine on Home Shopping Network.
Oh, okay. I did not know. I would not have expected that to still be really profitable. That's really cool.
And he was looking for a partner in a particular project. We weren't the right partner, but we had a couple of great conversations. And one of them was, I've scoured this industry looking for partners to work with. And he goes, well, all I see is people spending $100 to get $80 out of a client. Like the lifetime value is $80.
Yep.
But we spent $100 to get them, which is very easy to do in this industry.
Oh, yes.
In any industry, really, because social marketing is expensive and it can be very fruitless. But I thought that was a fascinating conversation that he had with me about that, because the attrition starts.
Yep.
One of the biggest failures in this industry was Beer Across America, which was from the 90s, and they stumbled across beer in the mail.
Okay.
Well, you think wine has restrictions?
Beer more so?
Oh, wait. None of the have you read any of the rules that mention beer? They never mention beer. They just talk about wine. All the rules are around wine.
Oh, boy.
So there's like way worse. And this guy got in huge trouble. He actually got arrested by the state of Utah.
Oh, my.
When he went over there.
Utah is going to be, that makes sense.
Right? So they actually are the only people that I know that have arrested anybody.
Oh, boy.
And he was killing it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 1990. He went from $0 sales to like 20 million like in 4 years.
Whoa.
I mean, it was crazy.
It's
but
incredible.
He's still in the attrition hadn't kicked yet.
Yeah.
Ended up going bankrupt.
Oh, gosh.
Like a few
He
years
got
later.
bankrupt? He got arrested?
Yeah.
Well, and you say the wine industry's hard.
Now he's
Sounds
back
like beer is
because he's now back in the business. By the way, he sells wine.
good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him.
I don't know. So when you find these wineries, are you all over the world, or are you just in California? What are you doing?
So right now it's just within the U.S. and again that's due to shipping, and also not really I'm not at a size yet where I need to work with distributors. But yeah, so really getting to make that personal connection myself with the owners of the winery, winemakers, etc. And then I also do each month a virtual live tasting. So to connect and learn the stories behind the bottles for all of the members
That's
as well.
great.
So yeah,
that's good stuff.
Yeah,
You just in your living room.
I do. Well, kind of in my kitchen area a little bit. Maybe I should just start cozying up on the couch during our tastings. But yeah, no, very, very casual. We have, people that are at all different levels, which I think is such a beautiful thing. Like there are people that are asking these super scientific winemaking questions, and then people that are, really, really basic entry level stuff, and everybody is like getting along and having a fun time. So it's cool to see.
And so what's lighting you up?
Oh gosh, well, lots and lots of things, So I think that, one is taking the idea of getting lots of questions for wine recommendations and being able to say, you know what, as much as I have a few recommendations of things you could grab at Total Wine or at your grocery store, that isn't really what I actually want you to drink. I think you should be drinking this, and being able to really put that wine onto people's doorsteps and connect them to the people making those wines. I think that, seeing people having those light bulb wine moments, really starting to refine their palates, really start to be able to talk about descriptors and feel confident. That's a huge thing with wine. Whatever someone smells in a wine is correct for them, right? Like, this is what I try to teach everyone. I'm like, everything that you smell, this is your nose, this is your brain, everything connecting, like, this is correct. However, you just have to be confident in saying it. And it's okay if nobody agrees with you. Like, this, you're not getting judged, you're not getting graded. This is just your own perception of the wine. So have some fun with it and share how you feel. So I think kind of seeing people get more confident, I think, the appreciation. So I have this appreciation for wine, the appreciation for low intervention wines, small production wines, et cetera, and seeing other people kind of understand the value of that and kind of see that and start to look at wine, I would say, as a whole in a different way. That makes me really, really happy.
The movie The Rookie, about Jim Morris, the pitcher. He's a teacher in a chemistry class, and he asked the question, and the kid goes, "The nucleus?" is a question mark. He goes, "No, say it with authority and make me believe it. The nucleus." Right? Tastes like strawberries, not strawberries.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because there's no wrong answer, right?
Yeah. Or the worst thing is when everyone would sit on mute and not say anything.
Yeah, right. That's
and I'm like, okay, well, maybe some strawberries. Anybody else? Any other red fruits? You kind of have to like draw it out of people at first, and then you see them get more and more comfortable.
I always tell people, if you're cooking and you're putting basil in a pasta sauce, smell your fingers. If you bite an apple, smell the apple. If you bite a plum, smell the plum.
I love that.
If you step on a raspberry, get on your hands and knees and smell the raspberry. So let's talk about that for a second. We're actually already at 45 minutes.
Oh, gosh.
Low intervention, organic, biodynamic. My premise is this is the old is new again. Because these practices were always the original practices.
That was the original way.
Right.
Could not agree more.
And so do you seek those, or do you seek the best value you can find based on what you're looking for?
So I do not specifically seek biodynamic or organic, like it's not each bottle of wine has to have that seal. I think that it's more kind of the ethos behind the wine, the philosophy behind the wine, and the practices that happen in the cellar, and in the vineyards, of course, as well, And you know what, like, I think the wines that I want to share with people, I want them to be a clear expression of the grape. I want them to clearly express the terroir. I want them to really just kind of show what the region has to offer, show what the grape has to offer, and kind of show the winemaker's style as well, even though that might be to not really add much, take anything away from the wine. So, I love the kind of like nothing added, nothing taken away kind of thing, and and definitely different. I mean, I know that you know this, but just clarify for everyone, not talking about natural wine. That's kind of a whole separate thing.
Doesn't really exist, but that's okay.
Right?
There's no such definition.
I know, it's a whole, that's the whole thing. So just to be clear, I'm not saying like, oh, we only have natural wine. It isn't that. It's just, people that, to me, it's about the, like, I feel like, I was kind of saying this when you asked, what is it that brings me joy, and people getting that appreciation of wine. On the other side of it, I love winemakers and winery owners that have an appreciation for the grape and an appreciation for really just expressing what is there. And I just think it's a really beautiful thing.
I think you're right on with your philosophy. It's exposing people to things they otherwise wouldn't buy necessarily, and learning their palate. And the only way they can do that is you present them properly made wine for what it is. And so it's a proper description of a Petaluma Gap Pinot Noir, or it's a proper description of a Napa Valley Cab, or a Saint-Emilion. It's important to present the good valued versions or the good representations, and then they can draw a conclusion on their own palate, which will change.
For sure,
right?
For sure.
At some point.
Oh yeah, we always talk about how there are certain people, we'll continue on the Pinot Noir example, who literally have they've tried a Pinot Noir and they're like, I didn't think I liked Pinot Noir. Like, I can't believe I like this. And I'm like, how could you not like Pinot Noir? But it's really easy to not like Pinot Noir. If you're drinking Pinot Noir, that's your $3 example that you're getting from who knows where it came from. Like, and what it's been through, like, that could easily be somebody's wine that they didn't think was good enough. And then the next person didn't think it was good enough. And then it finally got bottled or blended or whatever it would be, like that's the kind of Pinot Noir that, if that's the only kind of Pinot Noir you've had, like, I totally understand that you might not taste that and think, oh, this is incredible. This is changing my life. Whereas, you taste taste a Bordeaux. You could even taste a Sonoma Coast, Petaluma Gap, Russian River Pinot Noir, and absolutely love it. So.
It's funny, actually. It just happened. It was in France. She loves Napa Cabs and some Bordeaux, and I poured her a Grand Cru Burgundy, so it wasn't inexpensive. But she's never suggested ever in our life together as friends for the last 30 years that she would venture into a Pinot, and she goes, "This is really good." I go, "Well, it's really pedigree too, but but at least now I know you can drink this stuff and not just drink Napa Cabs."
Exactly. And yeah, it's really really interesting to see people, kind of go through those light bulb moments and that transformation.
I've told this story before. In fact, my daughter was bugging me the other day. She took me to a Brooklyn wine shop, natural wine shop, quote unquote. And she said, "Let's buy this." And it was on the bottom shelf was a Neardale. It was from Sicily. It was organic or biodynamic, and it was $75, which drove me crazy. I said, "I don't buy wines for $75. I got a warehouse full." She says, "Come on, Dad." So we bought it. It was terrible. It was actually just bad. It wasn't that it had turned bad. It was just not a well-made wine.
Yeah.
And I go, "See, just because it's organic or biodynamic, it doesn't make it any better. Haven't you had a bad carrot from Whole Foods?"
Organic carrot all the time.
All the time, right? So it's really about the expression of the proper expression of what, and I think most wines that are properly made with that same philosophy that you're seeking are going to be low in sugar.
Yep.
They're going to be low in intervention.
Yep.
And they're going to have the minimal things it does to make it work.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Does that bother you, the Apothic Reds and the 19 Crimes, or do you look at it like, well, these are people that are going to come to my side of the fence sooner or later?
That's so funny because I was literally going to say the exact second part of what you said. And so my sister, if you listen to this, Renee, don't be mad for sharing this, but she just was all about the 19 Crimes. And that was just, that's okay. And that's what she would drink, even though, I'm getting more and more into the wine world. And I'm like, Renee, you really have to, I promise you, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're missing out on. She had never tasted that Burgundy that you poured for your friend. She had never tasted, if it doesn't even have to be that, just anything that's just, not a bulk wine. And now that she has, she totally had her light bulb moment. She totally gets it. That said, though, I didn't force her. I didn't push her. I think, if that's what she wanted and that's what she was interested in, she didn't really have interest in the other stuff, that is totally okay. Meanwhile, you have my mom, who she had her first sip of delicious wine. She's like, never again. I am on this high-end wine journey, and she is hilarious.
Wow.
She used to tell me that she only liked sweet wine.
Yeah.
And I was like, interesting. And then, I started just having her try literally anything that I was having. And she's like, oh, this is so good. She's like, but yeah, I still don't like dry wine. I'm like, Mom, this is definitely dry. It's also funny hearing people talk about descriptors in funny ways like that. But anyway, I think there's a place, and I think that there are people that they just do not have the interest. And I think that that's totally okay. As much as, as soon as you have a curiosity, come on over, talk to me, talk to Paul, and we will tell you everything you need to know to hopefully get you on our side of the fence. But at the same time, if it's not an interest, that's totally fine.
It drives me nuts. Not because, well, we've been through this so many times. My father knew Bob Trinchero when he invented White Zinfandel. Actually stopped at the winery after the first bottling, and that was the wine that brought people to the table, back in the 70s.
Yep.
was White Zinfandel, and now we've got the 19 Crimes. I say the only crime is they put it in the bottle. But now Martha Stewart, of course, she's a criminal, so she's got her 19 Crimes.
Right? Yeah, the Chard, Martha Chard.
Yeah, she's got a Chardonnay. So, but the part that I told a story this morning, I want to tell it to you because I think it's interesting.
But yeah,
I took my social networker to Ralph's the other day to shoot some TikTok stuff, and I wanted them to kick me out, but they didn't. They never kicked me out. I'm like, what? Shouldn't they come over and say, "Why are you shooting in here? What are you saying?"
No, they're gonna be like, "Hey, will you tag us? We're at
That's right.
at Ralph's Grocery." Hashtag Ralph.
So this woman came in, and she's I'll net this out. She's looking at some wine, and I said, "Can I help you? I'm in the business." I gave her my card, and she says, "Well, I want to buy something other than what I usually drink."
Love that.
I go,
Very
"That's
good
great." I
starting
said,
point.
"Well, what do you drink?" She said, J. Lohr Cab. I said, "Okay." So I go, "Here's a couple of things in that price range that are Cabernets that I think you'll like." She didn't buy them. She left the aisle, and then she came back, and we realized that we knew each other.
Oh.
And I had coached either their kids or I think her husband was one of my coaches when I ran the Little League, and we started chatting again. So she knew now. She really knows I'm in this industry because I've been doing it for so long. And she didn't buy anything again. And so I told my social network, I said, look, you just witnessed two amazing parts of our industry that are hard to quantify and pin down. And one of them is that she actually was looking for something new.
Yep.
That was encouraging, right? You
Yep.
would love that.
Oh, for sure. That's yes. That's the exact person that you're like, all right, we're on our way. We're getting there.
Right, here we go.
First step.
And the other was that it's such an emotional decision that she couldn't even come to grips with taking the recommendation of somebody that does this every day. And that she still looked at the label and she still looked at the price and decided she'd do something other than the recommendation. I thought that was fascinating.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I love a recommendation.
To get them to trust you is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a very, very hard thing. Considering you knew this woman personally, she knows that you are in wine, and she still wouldn't take the recommendation. That's kind of crazy. So, I mean, back to the challenges conversation, that's certainly a challenge. Getting people to trust you and to trust your palate and to trust the decisions that you're making with the wine that you're bringing to their doorstep. So, I know you have totally been through that as well.
I'm interested to know what you think your next step is.
Oh gosh, sorry.
Besides the wine club,
question.
which is interesting, but I mean, you have an interest in lecturing. Do you have an interest in live events? Do you have an interest in like we talked about, writing?
Yeah. So, oh gosh. So, the advice, I've, of course, been given a lot of advice. Some advice that I've been given many, many times is to get really, really good at the first thing that you're doing and then start to focus on expansion and kind of doing other things. So I'm still working on getting really, really good at the wine club. It's just hit its 1 year mark this month, actually. Thank you. And so from there, though, I, of course, have plenty of ideas in my back pocket. So one is certainly live events. However, being, new to the Palm Springs area, I want to get some more roots there, continue to make connections in that area before doing anything live. People ask me all the time how, first it started with the wine recommendations. Now I'm doing that. Now they're saying, oh, like, will you host a trip to Napa? Will you host a trip to Paso? And I'm like, well, that sounds really fun for me too. So sure, I would love to do that. So that's maybe something that will come in, who knows, 1-2 years. We'll see how it goes. But that could definitely be something in the pipeline. I'm still writing a little bit for various publications around Southern California. I would definitely like to do more of that because I do really love writing, especially when it's not 350 pages.
Yeah.
So I get to do the fun writing now. And yeah, I think those are kind of my main ideas for how to, kind of continue on and build the brand.
Well, all those things will grow your knowledge base. And
Yes.
there's always something to learn. I had a Sommelier here, Master Sommelier. He's actually the 1996, like the 12th in North America or something.
Amazing.
Very nice. His name is Manuel Camigi. He makes wine in the Puret, Spain. A really nice guy.
Wow.
Always doing something. And he was at a tasting with Daryl Cordy, who's a famed Sacramento wine merchant, one of the renowned Madeira experts in the world. And he pours an Armenian wine for him. And so Emmanuel's point was, not only do I have to compete against these wines that are pretty good value at whatever he tasted, because he's in the business of selling wine, he goes, but now I've got to learn about them.
Yep.
And then he tells me, when I started this, and this is only 1996 and not that long ago, well after the Judgment of Paris and California being on the map, he goes, we didn't have to study these regions. We knew Burgundy, Bordeaux, a little bit of Argentina and Chile, but not much. Italy, Piemonte, Barolo, Barolos and Piemonte and Tuscany wines and Puglia and all that. He goes, that's all we had to study. And our task now at stage in 2022 is much bigger.
Oh, it's the world. There's nowhere that you don't have to study.
Armenia, Slovenia, Croatia,
Yep.
Uruguay, great. And so that's kind of interesting because there's always something to learn.
Absolutely.
So the more you write and the more you talk and the more you broadcast and the more you get on podcasts, the more you learn.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I just learned a lot from you in our conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. So we're at an hour, so I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay.
To see what you've learned along the way.
Oh gosh, a quiz. You don't
But
prepare me for
but
this.
there's only half the people not even half the people get this right though. I used this example this morning. It's kind of interesting because the many of these tests, like the Master of Wine, I'm assuming the diploma for WSET is not only do you have to recognize something about a wine or taste it or whatever, but they're more interested in the argument you make to protect that decision.
Yes, I love that.
Okay, so it's like
Very,
if you think this
very academic.
right, you think this is Bordeaux, and it's like if it's not, if it's some kind of obscure Napa cab, Fine, but why did you think it was a Bordeaux?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of down the line as this question.
Okay. I'm ready to defend my answer. Whatever.
So this is a book called Wine is the Best Medicine. It's from the 70s, written by a medical doctor in France. It's been translated to English since then, of course. Dr. E.A. Murray. He's also a homeopathic doctor, but he was a licensed MD as well.
Very cool.
And this is a book on human maladies, things like allergies, anemia, arteriosclerosis, easy for you to say, bronchitis, etc. But he's got the wine. They're all French. So
Okay.
I'll give you the three choices that help the malady. So if you have hypertension or bronchitis or a fever or gout, what you should taste with it. So I'm going to give you one of these ailments.
Okay.
And three choices of wine.
Okay.
That might help you with this.
Whew, okay. I'm a
Like
PhD,
I said, it's a
not an
crapshoot.
MD. I'm a PhD.
It's a crapshoot.
I'm
Okay?
not prepared for this.
That's right, doctor, but the wrong kind of doctor. And I have no softball question to give you because the last two guys who were in here were champagne makers, so I gave them the question, but the answer was champagne, so they got it right.
Oh gosh.
But other than that, it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Okay, I'll do my best.
All right, so let's just say you have nervous depression,
Okay.
and this might be good. You know, your husband's a pilot.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the verge.
Yeah, this might apply. You could have an Alsatian white.
Okay.
You could have a Medoc red, so
Okay.
something from the right bank.
Okay.
Or you could have a Côte de Beaune, something from Burgundy, to help with your nervous depression.
Okay, so before you even listed the answers, my answer was going to be whichever is the highest alcohol wine, because that's going to calm your nerves the quickest. I assumed it would be a red. I think a red wine is kind of warming, it's calming, it makes you feel kind of cozy and at ease. That said, I'm going to go with the Medoc red, because I think overall it's going to create just that kind of calming sensation. After one glass, you're probably going to be feeling a little bit better and a little less nervous.
Well, you're right.
Really?
The answer's right.
Oh, but my reasoning is a little off.
No, well, let me read it to you.
Okay.
It says the Medoc red, so that's fabulous. Why? Question mark. Because the glycerin it contains combines in the intestine with the phosphates of the fermented grape juice to form glycerol phosphates of natural lime, which have tonic virtues and which do not interfere with the functional integrity of the nervous system.
Interesting. That was kind of the opposite, I think,
Yes.
of what I was
Well,
saying.
yeah,
I
but
was
still,
saying it
we
was
got to the part of the nervous system. That was
yeah,
good.
yeah. The nervous system is my only overlap.
Okay, so then the question is, what's the dosage?
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, wait. I answered that, or
No, what do you think that this doctor recommends that how much Medoc you should have?
is this just like per day, like in a sitting, or like
Yeah, per day.
Per day. I'm gonna say like 2 glasses a day.
Well, actually, it's 2 glasses a meal.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Now, see, if
Make
I
that
asked you the question about fever, and it was dry champagne, if you notice on this grid here, there's only one with a whole bottle. And that's so if you have a dry champagne, if you have the fever, then you can have a whole bottle of champagne a day.
This is I need to take a picture of this, because this is going to be my new. I'm not going to take NyQuil or anything like that anymore. I'm just gonna.
You take a picture and then you can get on eBay. I have 2 or 3 copies of this that I bought on eBay, but it's the problem is I can't ask everybody the question, because if it's an Italian winemaker, they get mad that it's all French answers. So we don't talk to those guys about that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But there's also a couple of ailments here where he says we're not sure exactly, but you certainly feel better after you have the 4 glasses. So
which is pretty much my answer, right? I'm like,
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know any scientific, but no matter what, you're definitely going to feel better if you have a glass of Bordeaux.
It's been a huge pleasure having you here today, Nia. Thank you so much for coming up, and I hope that we get a chance to share some wine one day when we're down in the desert.
I hope so too. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me. This was lovely.
We were very close to buying a house in Desert Horizons a couple of years ago.
Oh.
And we didn't do it because my wife's family lives there. And then
Okay. Yep. Totally understood. Fair enough.
They don't listen to this anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I wish you all the luck with what you're doing, and we hope to see you out on in the social world and in some articles, LinkedIn or
I will see you there. I'll be there.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you
again.
so much.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.